This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis brings hope to the residents of the Italian city of Camerino, greatly damaged by an earthquake 3 years ago. Take a look at the most ancient crucifix in St. Peter's Basilica, one that has inspired artists and saints. The next International Eucharistic Congress is coming up. Discover with us how Hungary is preparing for this world event in 2020. Discover this and more on this week's Vaticano. Pope Francis received 103 pontifical representatives at the end of 4 days of meetings in the Vatican. These are the Pope's ambassadors, and since Francis was elected in 2013, he's called them to the Vatican for meetings every 3 years. This time, instead of giving a prepared speech, the Holy Father preferred 2 hours of private conversation. In prepared remarks, the Holy Father listed 10 suggestions on how to be a good nuncio. Among them, there's the courage to defend the Church from evil, to be obedient, and to be a man of prayer. The Vatican's Office for Catholic Education issued a document on June the 10th on how to approach gender theory in centers of Catholic education. Associate Professor of Ethics at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome, Father Robert Gall, summarized the contents of the 31-page document for us.
It's really wonderful to have this document, which is just from the right dicastery, from the Vatican, from the Catholic Church, because it's from the offices responsible for Catholic education. And it begins right away by acknowledging that there's a crisis in our education today, and it's a crisis that's affecting the Catholic Church. And the document is all about the word gender, because the word gender poses a challenge for us today, and yet it's a term that has become very widespread in our culture. Well, the document makes a distinction between gender theory and gender ideology, which is a distinction really that Pope Francis has been suggesting in a number of his interviews. Also in Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis denounces gender ideology. This gender ideology is really a heresy, and it's based on an anthropological dualism, meaning understanding the human being is split, dual, between that which we are in our bodies and that which we'd like to be. This implies transgenderism, whereby a boy or a girl may decide to be the other sex by expressing a different gender. Of course, that's condemned by the document because the document suggests that we can find fulfillment and happiness by being who we really are. So this impact is going to be a challenge and an opportunity in Catholic schools. It's really an opportunity so that Catholic schools can have very clear policies about employment and about accepting children into the schools. I was also struck by the courage in the document in addressing same-sex attraction and connecting it to issues of gender ideology, because those who claim that men and women are not in any way ordered towards persons of the opposite sex are in fact infected by some kind of gender ideology, because sexuality is an ordering towards the complementarity that we find in the opposite sex, which is recognized in biology, but it's also recognized in the fruitful, faithful love of happy families, happy marriages between a husband and a wife.
The document, Male and Female, I Created Them, doesn't have a doctrinal authority, but according to a source speaking to Catholic News Agency, is preparing an additional document on gender theory that will become the official magisterium of the Church. Pope Francis celebrated the Feast of the Holy Trinity together with survivors of a 2016 earthquake that struck the city of Camerino and nearby towns in Italy's Le Marche region. Upon arrival, the Holy Father visited the village called Sai that was constructed to give shelter to those who lost their homes in the earthquake. An aged couple welcomed the Holy Father with a snack and told him that their house and their health was greatly damaged by the earthquake. Pope Francis replied that health is good, but hope is what makes miracles. the earthquake took much from the city's residents, including their cathedral. Offering flowers to Our Lady, Pope Francis remained in silent prayer. 300 people lost their lives and thousands suffered the effects of the earthquake. 3 years are not enough to recover and heal the wounds. During the Mass in front of the cathedral, Pope Francis relaunched once again his message of hope, saying that the hope of the Spirit is long-lasting, even when earthly hopes expire.
The hope of the Spirit is not even optimism. It is born deeper. It rekindles, in the depths of the heart, the certainty of being precious, because they are loved. It instills the confidence of not being alone. It is a hope that leaves peace and joy within, regardless of what happens outside.
Pope Francis concluded his trip by visiting those who are the city's hope, the children. All of them have received or are preparing to receive Christ in their first Holy Communion this year. In a few minutes, we'll show you the crucifix that inspired Michelangelo when he sculpted the Pietà. The Eucharist is closely linked to Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. Through his crucifixion, Jesus conquered death, and the Church teaches that his sacrifice on the cross is made present to us during the celebration of every Eucharist. The altar itself symbolically represents Golgotha. That's why a crucifix is required to be on the altar whenever Mass is celebrated. The first cross on the altar appeared approximately in the 6th century. It began to be common practice when Pope Innocent III in the 13th century required the cross to be placed between 2 candles on the altar during Mass. Soon after his decision, crosses and crucifixes started to spread as the liturgical symbol in the Catholic Church. Some of the best examples of those medieval crucifixes are in Rome. Sponsored by the Knights of Columbus, this crucifix from St. Peter's Basilica and another 2 were restored in 2016.
And these 3 crucifixes going back to the 1300 are outstanding images of the crucified Christ. And the crucified Christ, of course, is the image of the Father par excellence.
Cardinal Stafford participated in the book presentation at the Vatican Museums dedicated to the restoration of St. Peter's Basilica's wooden crucifix. The restoration took more than 15 months of work. Layer by layer, the restorers revealed the original 14th century image of Jesus Christ, carved by the Italian artist Pietro Cavallini. The figure of Jesus is 7 feet tall and weighs 160 pounds. The body is skillfully carved with anatomical precision in centuries-old Italian walnut.
The only way that we know of God is through Jesus Christ, the mission that he had. God the Father is invisible. We will never see him except in the next life. The only thing we have now is faith and the images that we have through Jesus and through his Holy Spirit. There are many images of God, but those images many times are too sweet, too saccharine, and they really do offensive. They're offensive to history, to the history of what it means to be human. the best, the most important image that we have of God is a crucifix that is well done.
The Archpriest of St. Peter's Basilica, Cardinal Angelo Comastri, underscored the spiritual aspect of the crucifix. This crucifix, he said, represents the moment of Jesus' cry before his death, and through this cry, Jesus asks each one of us, would you receive this gift of God's sacrifice? St. Catherine of Siena answered Jesus' cry. While in Rome, she went every day to St. Peter's to pray in front of this cross, and with her letters restored stability in the church. And young Michelangelo Buonarroti answered by sculpting the Pietà, reiterating the features of Christ's face from this cross to his marble wonder.
These ancient portraits of the Lord Jesus, available to the people, especially to young people, to the aged, to those who were on drugs, because then they can point to this crucifix and say, that is my life, and it gives me hope. So I believe the Knights of Columbus understood that, the importance of having fine images of Christ, and thus fine images of the Father, and they were willing to give backing to it.
While this week the Church is celebrating the Feast of the Body and Blood of Christ locally, the Church in Hungary is preparing an international celebration on the gift of the Eucharist. The next International Eucharistic Congress will be held in Budapest in 2020 from September the 13th to the 20th. In Rome, the Hungarian Primate and President of the Organizing Committee, Cardinal Péter Erdő, shared with us how Hungary is preparing for this worldwide event.
Die Vorbereitungen laufen schon sehr intensiv. Das heißt, wir haben in Ungarn
The preparations are already very intense. This means that in Hungary we have a large secretariat with many co-workers. Each diocese has people in charge, lay people and priests. The Bishops' Conference has a commission for this, a commission composed of personalities of cultural and social life. But there is also a very intense pastoral preparation. We have a mission cross with small relics, the saints and blesseds of Hungary and of the whole Carpathian Basin, from the Central and Eastern European regions. And it is very intense because the cross travels all around the region and stops in every big city, in every big cathedral. All this is accompanied by a program, adoration of course, but also retreats, exhibitions and various programs about the lives of the saints and blesseds whose relics are placed on the cross. And this is really impressive because we have many martyrs from the 20th century in every country, in Romania, in Ukraine, in Slovakia, in Hungary itself, in Serbia, Croatia, in Bosnia, everywhere. And that is already a program that unites the peoples around it.
Ein Programm, das die Völker rundherum verbindet.
Is there a chance that Pope Francis will come to Hungary for the Eucharistic Congress?
Vater herzlich eingeladen.
We have cordially invited the Holy Father from the Bishops' Conference and the Hungarian state. He has not replied officially yet. At the last congresses, the Pope was represented by a legate. But we can still hope. We have not yet received the answer. Either a papal legate will come, or perhaps Pope Francis himself will come.
Oder vielleicht kommt Papst Franziskus selbst.
Why is the devotion to the Eucharist important? And what can modern media, perhaps also the social media, contribute to promote this devotion?
Wandlung in den letzten Jahrzehnten.
Well, there's been an interesting change in the last few decades. When I was a young priest, we thought, well, Eucharistic adoration, the exposition of the Most Holy Sacrament, is perhaps a form of piety of the past. And now I see that young people everywhere, even in Germany, like Eucharistic adoration very much, and many come together also in Budapest. That is the case, sometimes in silence, sometimes with meditations and music, but it is very popular. And we have to explain again how the Council did it, that the Eucharistic celebration, the Holy Mass, is despite everything the first step. And only then you can organize a long adoration. This, of course, also has consequences for the programs of the Eucharistic Congress. First a great Mass, and then the procession. And not the other way round, of course. But even now there are churches, parishes that say, from now on we will organize perpetual adoration. And that is also very beautiful. It requires effort, it costs a lot of attention and organization, so that the Blessed Sacrament never remains alone. But it has an effect.
Why should people come to the Eucharistic Congress in Budapest?
To meet Jesus Christ in Budapest. To meet Christ, that is the point. And Jesus Christ is the center of our faith. So not just a theoretical quantity. We are not a natural religion. So one should not only philosophize freely about the impressions and experiences of one's personal life, we have much more. God has spoken his final word in the person of Jesus Christ, and he wants to communicate with people, also today, through Jesus Christ. So the centrality of the person of Jesus Christ is perhaps one of the most important elements of the Eucharistic Congress. But Jesus Christ is a historical person, not just a legend, not just a beautiful symbol. And that is why what connects us to him historically is also very important. And there we have the community, the church, the tradition. That is also very important. And of course, all this heritage must now be lived. So the problems of today's world must worry us, so that we can find the right answers in the light of Jesus Christ and realize what is in our power.
Thank you, Your Eminence.
You're very welcome.
Stay with us to discover the concerns of the Holy See at the UN in Geneva about autonomous weapons systems.
A few weeks back, at the UN Geneva, the 2019 group of experts of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, CCW, exchanged their views about lethal autonomous weapon systems, also known as killer robots. The Holy See delegation called to mind their danger.
During the past 5 years, the delegation of the Holy See has provided a number of contributions that have highlighted the broader risk posed by lethal autonomous weapon systems. In this, the challenges presented by laws are not limited only to the realm of international humanitarian law, but also raise potential serious implications for peace and stability.
Excellency, you mentioned here in the speech that the Holy See in the past 5 years had provided a number of contributions. I want our viewers to listen to an excerpt from your predecessor, Archbishop Tomasi, during the CCW conference exactly 5 years ago. Let's listen to that.
The Holy See proposes to put in place a group of governmental experts on lethal autonomous weapon systems, another one on the use of explosive weapons in populated areas, and a third group for the revision of the protocol on incendiary weapons. These are not new issues for the CCW. What is happening on the ground in many conflicts is unacceptable. The CCW bears a part of the responsibility with regards to these negative developments and to providing solutions in areas of its competence.
Now, I'm a correspondent here at the United Nations for EWTN for almost 5 years now. And after 5 years, I see a lot of talks, including the Holy See, of course, trying to find solutions. But watching or reading the daily news, it seems to me that there's a lot of talk but little to no actions to implement international humanitarian law. I think Antonio Guterres lately said, you know, when you come to the UN, bring plans, no words or speeches.
Our concern is anthropological. What does it mean? It means in the future world where we will have so many machines, so many intelligent machines, we are defending a very basic ethical position. No decision where human life is involved cannot be made without human participation. And the Holy See, luckily, I think, and happily, we are participating in this from the very early stage, because the development and the consequences of what we are saying will be absolutely unexpected. Very, 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 very crucial, very big, very decisive for the future.
Excellency, in a word or three, is the Holy See against or for autonomous lethal weapon systems?
I think this question must be answered really clearly. We are absolutely against anything that would autonomously decide about human life.
Isn't that also, now I'm talking to you as an archbishop, as a Catholic, as a priest, isn't it also a little theological? When you think about it, the original sin, Cain and Abel, you know, that they're killed and then they're hid. Is that where the war started? Isn't that in us somehow? There's an enemy, we have an enemy, there must be an enemy. Is this not part of our being?
I think what you said exactly, you know, this even we are speaking any ethical conversation is somehow a surprise, no? That human being can be so terribly negative, no? You know what some people say?